So here's my question for you, Rebecca. You would be the first woman, first LGBT candidate from here that would take office here. I'm a foundational Black American, and so there are a lot of concerns that I have, and the nation, the world really got to see. I mean, we had Rodney King in the '90s, and then we get George Floyd, and that seemed to activate everyone. But that seems to be kind of waning now, as other things are um, slowly taking its place as being more important. I was dismayed when Congress passed an AAPI hate bill, but did not pass one for African Americans. That was definitely a concern for me. And while there were definitely issues uh, that AAPI community members were facing, um, we're still being, I mean, it's almost daily, where we're being, brutalized and murdered by police and violence and everything else that's going on. So, uh, is there any platform that you have for us? And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. And I do think that we need specific, I believe in universal programs like I've been talking about, but we also need programs specifically for African Americans in this country because of the unique, history and circumstances that African Americans in this country are in. And one of those is reparations for slavery. And there's multiple aspects to it. One is certainly, I mean, it's obvious that the effects of hundreds of years of enslavement and then subsequent discrimination is still having impacts today. That's indisputable. And so that's one reason to provide reparations. And it's not so much about, I don't know, there's a common I think it's a cartoon that goes around showing like equality versus equity, and equalities, everybody's on this line and you just give everybody, $10. But if one person's at this level and this level and this level, and you give them all $10, they all just move up like that, but it's still unequal. So that's where you need to have targeted programs. Then the other part of reparations is that it's simply money that's owed. The 40 acres and a mule, it was not paid. And so this is a debt, and the debt should be paid, and the government should make good on the promise. So it's also a moral and financial obligation that has not been filled. And so I support a modern version of 40 acres and a mule for African Americans in this country, or African descendants of slave, like whatever the community definition. But yeah, I support reparations. And then I think we also need to bring back the full Voting Rights Act. It's been gutted piece by piece over the decades, and even more with the Supreme Court that we have now. But it's not the case 50 years later, after the Civil Rights Movement, that the Southern states are just good to go. That they're, we see as soon as elements of the Voting Rights Act are removed, then suddenly ballot boxes and predominantly Black neighborhoods start disappearing, and they're being, I mean, it's so obvious. So the Voting Rights Act also needs to come back. And then on policing, we need to demilitarize the police. The weaponry and equipment that police have, a lot of it comes from the military. So why are we having, unlike the military, police are not trained for combat in war zones, but they're given combat equipment and machinery. And so I would vote for and co-sponsor and push for stopping the transfer of military equipment to police departments. And there was actually, even before George Floyd, I think it was in around 2014, 15, there was an amendment to a bill, and it was to do that, to demilitarize, stop the program of transferring military equipment to police departments. And the incumbent in my race, Kilmer, he voted against that. So that's something I would have voted for, to stop that. And then we also need to have more, the exact name of the procedure is escaping me right now, but when there's a police department that's riddled with corruption and racism, systemic racism, racial profiling, and the Justice Department, U.S. Justice Department, can come in and start to investigate, oversee because the department has proven that it's unable to fix it itself. And I think the U.S. Justice Department needs to come in and be doing that a lot more than it is right now. So,
Well,
yeah.
let me before you answer Mark's question there, and I think he's going to join us here in a minute. And to not sound like Trump, I do believe in law and order. That said, I kind of feel like if we were to do away with qualified immunity, and bad officers were held accountable, then America at large would understand if okay, this is how we needed to apprehend this person or resolve the issue, um, and they could look at the evidence, and it would be in a much fairer way. But that would seem to be, to me, the only way that you're truly going to clean up, these bad apples that exist, because they seem untouchable, right? The thin blue line, and they go against
Mhm.
their own. If folks, other officers, speak out in their departments, I mean, we know there's gangs in these departments and everything else, but if you got rid of qualified immunity, I think would really go a long way to fixing that. Because there are, I'm not a type of person that's like, oh, an officer killed a black person, and they were wrong for it. I don't operate that way. But when you look at the facts, and it's pretty obvious, right? But they're just so protected on there. So, do you agree with that? Do you think something different? What's your kind of stance on qualified immunity?
Yeah, I think we need to end qualified immunity as well and be able police officers should not be untouchable. They are supposed to be agents and enforcers of the law, yet the law doesn't apply to them. Yeah, we need to get rid of that. I absolutely agree with you. And it allows so many abuses to continue. And then we even see where I think it was in New York City just in the last few days or the weekend, um, police officer shot like an 18-year-old who was playing with a water gun. And then
An
after it
orange one.
happened, that what?
An orange one. I mean, it was clearly
Yeah,
a
it was
toy. It was like
obviously,
yellow and orange.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like a super squirter or something.
Mhm.
And then after that, the police department came out with a picture about with some kind of a justification for water guns and I don't. You might know better than me, Marwan, but it was something like the anything that looks like a gun, we'll take it as they came up with this very strange, ridiculous legal justification, and it just shows what happens when there's they can get away with whatever they want.
So, and another question I had for you was for reparations. I don't hear a lot of candidates advocating for reparations. That's kind of a third rail conversation. And the Democrats seem to wholly be moving away from that. Like there's an attack on woke Democrats or socialist Democrats. And, we can't talk about these woke issues because that's dead on arrival and we won't get the votes and we're going to get slaughtered in the midterms and all this other good stuff. Now, I know Bernie, there are a lot of things I liked about Bernie, but I don't think he was really for reparations. So it seems like you have a divergence there. But do you have any ideas on how to pay for reparations? Because you're advocating for $30 an hour and reparations, whatever that is. I would assume that's probably in the trillions as far as what they owe foundational Black Americans. But do you have any kind of, I don't know, ideas on how to pay for that, how to even go about that?
Yeah, one way, besides the taxes and prosecution of rich people getting away with not paying their taxes, one is reduction of military spending overseas. We have we spend more in the military than the next 10 countries combined. With their police departments in our country that have a bigger budget than entire countries' militaries overseas. We also have way more bases, just a continuous, basically unofficial occupation of countries that we're even supposedly allies with. So if we start to close some of those bases, do we need a base in Japan? I mean, they're an ally, right? So there's a lot of countries like that where let's close the bases, let's bring troops home, spend less money on that, take care of our veterans, and then that would also free up a lot of money that could be used, for example, for something like reparations. And I, um, yeah, this kind of what we need to not focus on that stuff or, arguments like we need we need to pull people need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and why would we give handouts and this kind of thing. Like, aside from all of that,
I
I don't
didn't
agree
own
with that.
slaves.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And like, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like the bootstraps thing, that phrase was originally intended to be ironic because it's not possible. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps because you're standing on them and you can't do it. And then
Well,
additionally, one
even
last
to a
thing, and
point.
then
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Well, to a point to that, the slavers didn't build anything.